with Syon, and we are going to be talking about our 20 favorite books. We are going to start at 20 and work our way to 1, and we will give a little brief explanation of why that book made it to the number that it is. And yeah, we're super excited, man. I hope you guys are having a good week. And here we go. Syon, what do you got to say?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on, Josh. This is gonna be tons of fun.
Oh, rock and roll, man. We're ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get started on our top 20, guys, we thought it would be a good idea because, there's too many good books, you know what I mean, to really make like a legit top 20. So we thought it would be cool to just drop a few honorable mentions. So how about you go first, Josh?
Absolutely. So I'm going to start off today with one that I actually knocked out of my 20 because I finished a couple books today, and that's going to be Meg by Steve Alten.
Awesome.
I actually read that this summer, and it was a perfect summertime read. I picked it up at a thrift store, and basically it's just a Jurassic Park with a shark. You know what I mean? There's just graphic, fun stuff happening, and you got a megalodon. So then the next honorable, are we going every other side?
Yeah, sure. No, let's just go one by one for the honorable
Cool.
mentions, man. But I did want to ask that is the same Meg that it's Jason with the Jason Statham film adaptation, right?
Oh yeah, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool.
And I did not see Jason Statham as, after reading the book, Jason Statham is definitely the wrong choice, but that's usually what happens in adaptations, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But this doesn't spoil anything for the story, but that was actually one of the reasons I enjoyed the story so much, was that he was a professor and he was kind of just dorky. He was just your traditional, I pictured him wearing like a nice button-up sweater, like a cardigan, and just teaching the class. Definitely not Jason Statham chugging beers in a bar.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess we'll check it out then, because the movie to me was like your typical like blockbuster flick, but people who talk about this novel really like this is one of the best action adventure.
It's why it didn't make it in the top 20 is it's not, I wouldn't say it's like a masterpiece, but it's just fun. It gets you back into like reading for fun. You know what I mean? You pick it up and I blew through it. It was like 2 days and I just blew through it. I actually had to set it down because it was so exciting. I was like, I'm going to read this in 1 day and then what? I'm going to have to go get the next one. So
awesome, man. Yeah. I'll definitely add it to the list, man. Cool.
It's worth it. The next one was Magpie Coffin.
Oh man, I've heard of this. Yeah.
Yes, it didn't make it in the top 20, but for me, it started a whole little avalanche of just reading like horror, like westerns as a whole. And for me, I didn't even realize that was a subgenre of horror, was like the whole western horror. And now I've seen, there's like Jack Ketchum wrote some, and different authors like that or there's Tim Curran. He also wrote a couple, and
yeah, and so, you know what, man? I'm not sure if this guy wrote horror westerns, but I know he's a really well-renowned horror author who also wrote westerns. His name is William Johnstone, I think.
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes. Yeah. I think Nick's read a couple or something like that, and he mentioned it. But yeah, Magpie Coffin was super cool. It's another one of those just action movie. Like it's like you're watching an action movie. You're following this indestructible character who just shoots up the West. And what else could you ask for other than some dirty, grimy, gory horror in the West?
Yeah. And now, without giving spoilers, is the only horror side of it the splatter for that particular novel? Or
yes, it's
so
more of a splatter punk, but just in the West. That's
awesome.
it.
Sounds right up my alley, man. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, really, the plot as a whole is not. I mean, it's interesting. Don't get me wrong. But if I was to review it today, I might have knocked maybe a half a star off to a star off based on plot. And that's ended up being why I kept it out of the top 20. Based on just, it really was like a shoot 'em up Western, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong. That's what you want. I mean, it's literally called a splatter Western. So
one thing I was always a little confused about, the publisher, I forget which publisher it is that puts these this series out. It's either Deadite Press or
I got it right here.
Deadite Press or
Death's
Grindhouse.
Press.
Death's Head. That's right. Okay, so Death's Head Press. when they say it's their splatter series, are their novels connected in any way? Because I know they're actually written by different authors. So I'm like, connected, or if it's like the theme of splatter westerns.
They mention different characters. I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't. But we'll try to keep it spoiler free throughout this. Hopefully, you guys.
For sure.
But hopefully, my radio voice sounds awesome to my subs. I hope they're enjoying this.
Hey, it sounds awesome to me, man. That's what matters in the end.
But yeah, they actually are all connected. It's nothing crazy, but the next book, it references one of the characters that you meet from the first book, which is Wile Young's book. And then the next one is Hunger on the Chisholm Trail. And he references a town and also a character from that story. So that was kind of cool.
Cool. Okay.
So they are connected, but loosely. Like you don't have to read all of them from beginning to end. Like if you just picked up the next one, you know what I mean? If you just read Dust, you'd be okay. You know what I mean? You
kind of like maybe Stephen King and his Dark Tower series.
Exactly. There's Easter eggs. Cool. They're Easter eggs. So I'll do the next one is I did Dreaming at the Top of My Lungs. That was the most recent story collection. It was basically going to be in this, but I just wanted to diversify my top 20 a little bit more. So it's probably 21 on the list right now. It was really good, outstanding writing, and there's a story for everybody. Got a little bit of cosmic horror. You know, there's one story that I didn't even talk about in my review, that there's an alien that's like living with this family for a while. And it's just super, like, there's just different stories for everybody. And definitely, if you haven't checked out Isreal Finn's collection, it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. And then, and like he's an indie author, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely, I think that was self-pub. So that was pretty cool. And you can tell that he's kind of honed his craft over a time period. He came off like he's been writing for a while. And when you were reading, you know what I mean?
I mean, that's like the biggest compliment I think you can give an indie author, because like with no edit, and I'm assuming he might have got it edited somewhere else, but I'm assuming like obviously like it's your story, you're writing. It's really cool to know that like someone who's never read you before says that. Like it sounds like, wow, I wouldn't have guessed that this was someone who just, you know what I mean, put this together essentially by himself. So
and if you look at his collection and read it, and if you didn't know it was indie, you wouldn't know. And if that's not the biggest compliment you can probably give an indie author. It's true though. Like if I feel like indie gets a knock because we've talked about it, you know, there's different story, they'll be put out and not quite up to snuff. And if people in indie just took their time a little bit more, like obviously Isreal did, because you know, he had submitted story from when I did a little more research and watched a couple other people's reviews, and Well Red Beard had mentioned like that he had been in other collections, but like anthologies with other authors. And so I feel like he's been writing it just came off like that. And it was his first book, so
I wouldn't be surprised if any of these stories were in those anthologies, which is why it's awesome. That should hopefully that gets him a bigger audience if they liked everything else in those books. But I'll definitely check him out, man. Especially like he's a really cool guy on his Instagram too. So yeah, he's definitely one I need to read.
It was super. Yeah, it's awesome. And then the next one, I think I have like 4 or 5 here, but the next one was the Wise Man's Fear, and that's by Patrick Rothfuss. I felt that it dragged a little bit in the beginning. That was a classic second fantasy story in a series. In every trilogy of fantasy, you will run into a little bit of a slog, and it usually is in the second book. But that being said, there was a great amount of world building in this one, and that's what set it apart for me. And it almost made it in also, but I'm also just I get that art it's an art form to write books, but geez, it's been 8 years and we're still waiting for The Doors of Stone. But luckily there is hundreds of other books I need to read before then. So Patrick, take your time. I respect you, but
yeah, dude. I mean, there's nothing. No horror novel will ever be scarier than my TBR.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it was cool because that one he goes into a school. Well, no, the school is in the first one. The second one, he gets like a job with this like rich guy, and it just was a cool dynamic of the story where he gets more into the fantasy side of things, where there's a lot more magic and things like that. So I did enjoy the Wise Man's Fear for that. And then the last one is actually by this guy named Syon Das, and he released this story collection called Buried with the Night.
Wow, man.
And yeah, so I wanted to give him a shout out. He's got a good thing going there. And I really enjoyed his story, Darjeeling. That was my favorite one. So I've talked about it 150 times. It's probably one of my top 10 short stories that I've read. So
it was a ton of fun to write, and I'm glad you're one of the few reviewers that actually touched on like the gore in that story. No spoilers, was really fun to write, but I had a lot more fun, I think, trying my best to capture what it would feel like to be in this really foggy Himalayan town. So thanks, man.
That was my favorite aspect of that story. Was, I'd say, that setting that you really. My favorite type of horror is that the ambiance of the, just that dark, okay, there's fog, there's these mountains, you don't know what's in the woods, I grew up in the woods and hanging out and camping, and to me that's scary. When you're that 5-year-old kid by the fire and you just hear something out in the woods and you're like, what was that? That's that natural fear. And when you were writing those scenes, it captured it. So I thought that was really cool. So it deserves to be pointed out.
Yeah, well, so. I actually I've never been there, but my dad used to go there a lot when he was a scout. So he used to tell me stories about just how just creepy and ominous everything was over there. So I thought it would be awesome to try to see if I can put him back there. But yeah, he enjoyed it for sure, but definitely wasn't a huge fan of the gore. But that was definitely my favorite part also, because it got cool. I wasn't probably expecting it to be as gory as it turned out, but by the end of it I was like, I probably want to submit it for a year's best hardcore horror, because I was like, I've been a fan of that series by Red Room Press. I think they're a subset of Comet Press. And I was like, it would be awesome if one of my stories got in, and it did. So I was really happy about that. But
I think it qualifies as hardcore. Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. Cool,
so,
man.
Awesome, man. Yeah. All right, your turn for your honorable mention.
Okay, so, and we got so much to talk about, so I'm just gonna kind of breeze through these a little, because we can spend all day talking about each one of these, obviously. But okay, exactly. So my first honorable mention, it goes to Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. The only reason this is not in my top 5 right now is because I'm still reading it. So I'd be a complete liar. I'd be a complete liar if I put it there and I pretend like I finished it. But I mean, I don't know what Blake Crouch can do wrong for me to want to take it out of that spot by the end of it, because this is hands down the most fun I've had listening to an audiobook, especially ever, man. It is, Crouch's writing is so seamless. It's not literary, but it holds the same weight. That's the best way I can describe it. And I don't know how I didn't read this guy before, man. And it's just such the writing is one thing. The storytelling of this, man. I'm not a huge sci-fi fan, and Josh knows this, but if this is the kind of sci-fi he writes, I will read everything. I'll read all his books in the span of a week. Yeah. Okay, so
you got it. Yep.
The second honorable mention I had was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaeldis. So this story definitely intrigued me, the premise, and on top of everyone raving about it, I was like, I got to check it out, even though I don't read this genre that much, and I'm glad I did, because for a commercially successful thriller novel, it is one of the most original plots I've read. Period, dude. The dialogue is so good. And Alex Michaeldis was a screenwriter actually before, and it's cool because I don't want to spoil anything, but at the end of the audiobook, he gave someone interviewed him, and he said he was gonna quit writing altogether because he tried screenwriting, and then he ended up working in a psych ward for a bit. And that's where he got the inspiration to write this. And hands down, it is one of the best endings of all time. It is so good.
Nice.
The only reason it is not on this list, and I'm going to get a lot of flack from my number 20 after saying all this, but the only reason it's not on my top 20 is I'm not saying every book on my top 20 is better than that one, but what I am saying is those books mean a lot more to me, so that's the only reason. But yeah, so The Silent Patient by Alex Michaeldis. Now the third honorable mention I have is Punch by J.R.R. Park. This is just one of the coolest slasher novels I've ever read, dude, and no one knows about it. It's so good.
Yeah.
So it's Punch by J.R.R. Park. It
I'm
is
taking notes.
basically, yeah, man. It's a really gritty, well-written, brutal revenge tale, and it basically serves as kind of a throwback to slashers from the '90s and mid 2000s, early 2000s, I see,
Yeah.
not really mid 2000s. And yeah, J.R.R. Park is just his prose is it's real good, man. It's actually very similar to Blake Crouch's prose. Now that I think about it, in the sense his writing style, it's not literary, but it holds the same amount of weight. And
Palatable. It's very easy to read, and that's why it's
absolutely.
so
And let me
successful.
tell you,
Yeah.
it's been a while when I read that book. It was a while since I've sided so hard with the main villain of that story. So I highly recommend.
That's so much fun though when that happens, isn't
Oh,
it?
dude, it is
You're
dark.
like you're
Yeah.
like yes.
It's dark and it's awesome. You're just rooting for him the whole time. And if anyone reads that and thinks I'm messed up in the head, you're probably kind of right. But oh well, it's definitely in my honorable mentions. And so the next one is a book called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This is basically, I don't want to give away anything about this, and it's by Mark Haddon or Hayden. I'm not sure he had pronounced his name, but it's basically it's not your standard mystery. I don't want to give anything away, but it's a very unique slow burn story with a very interesting main character. And that's all I want to say about it, because I I read it a while back, so I don't remember everything about it, but I just remember really loving relating to dark humor for the first time
Yeah.
reading. And I was around, I know I was between the ages of 11, which is way too young for this book, by the way. I was between the ages of 11 and 13 when I read it, and it spoke to my like sensibilities regarding my humor. So I highly recommend that if you guys want to read a very good mystery with which is told in quite a unique way with a really entertaining, interesting main character. So that's
Awesome.
the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime by Mark Haddon.
What a
And
freaking title though. Let's just say
yeah,
that for
yeah. It sounds like a Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy wrote this.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So the next book is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. You know, a lot of people haven't heard of. I'm
Heard
just
about
joking. Yeah, yeah.
it. Yeah.
It's been everywhere, but it really is like I'm always the person that's like immediately skeptical when someone's in the hype train about something. And I read this book actually well before I had heard that there was a film adaptation being made. This book is not only unique in the way the story unfolds. I listened to the audiobook. I don't think anything will ever beat how creeped out I was by it. It's the
That's awesome.
creepiest audiobook experience I've ever had. Anyone who wants to check this book out, man, you need to do the audiobook version because it's so well done. The last the and it's a master class in slow burn suspense. That's really what it is. You only have really a very small set of characters, and you're in one character's head throughout the whole story. The last hour of the audiobook, I was supposed to go to sleep because I had to get up in the morning to I hope he never hears this, but to help one of my friends named Daniel do something. I ended up canceling and making something up because I had to stay up, dude. It was so good,
Book
and
hangover, man.
oh yeah, dude. The last hour was absolutely phenomenal, and I don't think I'll ever check out the film because apparently, from what I've heard, they Charlie Kaufman did something totally different with the ending,
Uh,
and the ending to this is really what makes this book.
yeah.
And the journey is very good too, like in terms of showing, like Iain Reid shows us how to really craft suspense, but the ending is where it's at for this book. And if they change that, I'm skeptical. So
Yeah.
I might check it
I
out
think
one
that,
day, but yeah.
yeah, I respect that because I feel that there's a couple things you shouldn't change when you make the adaptation as a consumer of books. Uh, and I would feel that the ending is one of the most pivotal things. That's what the author wanted. So I feel like if you're changing the ending, then you're changing the trajectory of the story. I get that you have to change different things throughout to make it more palatable for like a TV or a movie. You know what I mean? I get that. You got to drive the plot a little bit quicker because people's attention spans are slightly smaller when you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you only got an hour. You got an hour and a half. You don't have 8 hours to build this setting and build the character work and all that. So I get it, but changing the ending is silly. So I would be skeptical also.
And the ending, no spoilers again. The ending in the book is something while if this really is a book, it felt like, you know what, man, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Iain Reid meant for this to be consumed through audiobook first and foremost, because the way the ending unfolds, you'll see why. And they couldn't
awesome.
have captured it really on film, I think, so maybe that's why they went with a different ending. But again, the trailer looked awesome, but the second I found out Charlie Kaufman's directing it, he's one of my favorite filmmakers, but I was like, man, this guy loves to make his movies just super. He just likes to create walls and break them. Not even fourth wall breaking. He'll just put up walls so he can break them down and add layers to all his stories. And this is already a layered piece of fiction. So I was like, I'm not sure if it's gonna get muddled or not. But yeah, anyway. So that's that. And my final honorable mention is Full Dark, No Stars by Stephen King. So
Nice.
I guess this is a good time to mention something about my top 22. You won't see a lot of King love in there, and first that's primarily because there's so many great authors, on our top 20 list. I figured I only wanted to limit each author to one book. Otherwise, there's easily two or three of these authors who, if I they have such incredible bodies of work that if I tried reaching for more than one or two of their books, they would make up the whole list. So
Exactly.
Stephen King is one of those authors, and actually, I might get hate for this, but I'm not a huge fan of his long fiction. Now granted, I haven't read a lot of it, but from what I have read, I'm just not a fan of it's like he does world building for things that don't require world building. You know what I mean?
This is true. I can see that. As a diehard Stephen King fan, yes, I get where you're coming from. I just choose not to talk about him as much either because I feel like he's a booktube crutch. There's a rumor out there that if you include Stephen King in your videos, if you tag him, you get more views. And I take pride in trying to limit that as much as possible. So bury me where you want to, but there's other authors out there. As much as I love Stephen King, there's other authors.
And exactly, I haven't. Yeah, for that reason, I'm not a fan of his longer fiction. In terms of his short stories, dude, I've only finished one of his short story collections in its entirety, not because I feel his writing as a short storyteller it's unrivaled. I've never. This dude is a short story factory. Like his stories are so dense, layered, heartfelt, scary as hell, dark as hell. It's just they're unbeatable to me, and I don't think he gets enough credit for his short story collections.
Even he says that. He says that same thing. He says He says it's an art form. I was watching an interview that he did, and he said short story writing is an art form, and if you don't do it, it's you lose the ability to, because you have to wrap this story up in such a short. Sometimes you get carried away and you start adding things, and then all of a sudden it's not a short story. It's very hard, and especially if you don't do it like while he writes all these longer books and these huge novels and things like that, and then all of a sudden he forgets how to do it. It's like riding a bike.
Exactly, man. I agree, and but because I have read a ton of his short fiction in many collections, but I've not finished them. The one collection I have finished is Full Dark, No Stars. And have you read it?
Full Dark? No, I haven't. I own it, but I haven't read it yet. So
yeah, dude, it's basically, I don't want to give away one thing about it. It's one of the most entertaining, well paced. That's the main thing. I was like, man, if all his stuff was this well paced, he'd be unbeatable. You know what I mean? But the pacing was amazing, and the prose in this was especially beautiful, and all these stories. So yeah, that's my final honorable mention. Full Dark, No Stars.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's get to it.
Number 20, right?
Number 20, man. You go first, and I guess we'll go one by one. And this will all be timestamped for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So my number 20 is going to be Parasite Milk by Carlton Mellick III. Mellick? Yes. So it was actually one of the first novellas that I read of his, and it was shortly after I had read another Bizarro book that will hopefully be on this list also. And I was like, who's this guy? Because they say that he's the most well-known of the Bizarro horror section. And I, first of all, didn't even know that was a thing. And then I read it, and it was one of the first books I've ever read in my life that I cringed hard at a certain scene in the book. If you read it for yourself, you will know. But there's this gentleman, and he goes to this alien planet, and it's really, the plot is not groundbreaking here. You're reading this for pure entertainment value, and you read it and you're like cringing, and you're like, what the heck is he he's got a beautiful mind. If I'm being honest, I don't know the gentleman, never had a conversation with the author, but Carlton Mellick, you are an very interesting man with your thought processes, and I respect you as an artist. That's where I'm gonna go.
I've heard so much about Carlton Mellick. He's like basically the god tier for Bizarro fiction. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, right? And I'll tell you what, it's something different, man. If you want to try something different, try some Bizarro horror out. That's what I'm gonna tell you. Just go pick up any one of his books, and
absolutely, man. And he a lot of his titles are like, I want to keep this podcast as clean as possible, so I can't even say some of his titles. But the dude's imagination just blows me away, even from his synopses that I've read. So I'm like, I definitely need to check him out. Cool, man. Awesome.
I would say try Parasite Milk out, because that dude, there's a scene in there, and it blends. It's kind of like the Blake Crouch thing. He blends extreme horror with some sci-fi, and it's really entertaining. So.
Okay, so before I start my top 20, I just want it to be known that, like I said before, I didn't read a lot in high school, but I read a ton in middle school. And I really started getting into literature and more like darker fiction, horror, when I was a senior in high school, which was about 7 years ago. So I tried to include books that I had read all the way back in middle school as well. And I figured I'd leave those at the tail end of my list. So that's why what the book I'm going to start with, people might be like, how is that in the top 20? And I'll give my explanation for it. And number 20 is Goosebumps number 56, The Curse of Camp Cold Lake by R.L. Stine, man. And I'm sure, like, have you heard of R.L. Stine?
I have no idea who he is.
Yeah, dude. Exactly. That's why I wanted
He's like a little Italian guy, right? And he writes some horror.
No, that's Martin Scorsese, but yeah. yeah. But yes, okay, so I was around 10 years old when I read this, man. And I remember this book because of how fun and how dark it was. At 10 years old, man, I had never read anything this dark.
Oh, yeah.
And when I went back, a few days ago when we were creating this list to look at what people thought of this, I was like, it's not just me. People are like, might be the darkest Goosebumps book out there. It's about a girl named Sarah who goes to this camp called Camp Cold Lake, and the lake is just grimy and everyone's just horrible to her. She hates her bunkmates, and she decides she's going to pretend to drown herself. What a twist, right? For a kid's horror. She's like, I must drown myself, and everyone will feel sorry for me. But things don't go exactly like that, and there's something else in the lake. And I don't think you can write dark fiction for children better than R.L. Stine proves, like better than he did here.
Yeah.
And this book solely is responsible for me to checking out all the other Goosebumps books and checking out the TV show. And the first VHS tape I saw of the show was a Welcome to the Dead House, which is actually Goosebumps book number 1. And that is also very creepy. So it was just great for me getting into darker horror as a whole. And this obviously led me to check out Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which I didn't include here for the sole reason that I feel that book is known more for its illustrations, if I'm being honest, than the actual stories. So, but that was awesome. And I highly recommend. You can enjoy this book as an adult too. I actually checked it out 3 days ago. It's a really short read, and I think it really will make you appreciate what R.L. Stine did for getting kids into horror more. So that's my number 20.
Oh yeah, genius. He's a genius author. I feel like everybody that probably is reading what we read now definitely read some R.L. Stine when they were growing up. Who can't go
Absolutely,
wrong
man.
there?
And I know like there was a bunch of Fear Street books that I read too, but I don't remember any of them. So that's why I didn't include that. But I could have
Yeah.
listed. I wanted to go with Curse of Camp Cole because it really is one of the darker books and the first one I started with. So yeah.
The first book I ever read by myself was a Goosebumps, and it was the one with the werewolf. I just couldn't even remember what it was, where the kid turned, it's the
Yeah.
werewolves one. That was the first one. You'll
Oh, is
never
it?
forget it because
I'm not sure. There's one called I think The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. I'm not sure if that's the one
it
though.
was something like that. Yeah.
Or
And it was just,
Bad Hair Day or something like that.
yeah, yeah. That was the
Yeah,
first one I
yeah,
read. You'll never forget it because you're like, hey, I remember that.
yeah. Yeah.
So, and like Syon said, similarly to me, I didn't read a lot growing up.
Yeah.
I kind of got carried away with just life and things that I thought were a little bit more important. And recently, I've actually started reading. I'd say probably in the last 3 or 4 years.
Nice.
I just always made the excuse that I was too busy. I'm working, and I have the girlfriend at the time and things like that. And it's only recently that I really made the decision to better allocate my time to doing the things that I enjoy, which is reading. And I also can thank Stephen King for that because he kind of
Absolutely.
reinvigorated. If I'm being honest, man, he did. That was one of
Yeah.
the first books I picked up, and then I was like, hey, you know what? We're running with it. So, all right. So number 19 is gonna be a weird one. It's gonna be Deadwood by Pete Dexter. I've talked about it on the channel before, but it was kind of a blindsided book for me. It was the first Western novel I've ever read. I did grow up watching the Western movies, Clint Eastwood and all that, but this one it's set in Tombstone, and you got Wild Bill Hickok, and there's just multiple twists and turns throughout the novel. Each section you follow a different character, a different main character, and really where Pete Dexter shines in his writing is breaking down the characters, and basically you enter the mind of different people at the same time when Wild Bill Hickok hit that town. And you kind of see the aging gunslinger and see that side of him where he's not quite as perfect as he was when he was in his 20s, and shooting up the town. Now you see a 40 to 50-year-old guy, and he's just not quite as quick, but he's still respected. So it's just really cool to see that, and see that, even that bulletproof top of the line guy can still be human. So it was just really cool. It was more of a tale of humans in the West.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. It's like a humanized gunslinger tale. It sounds great.
Yeah,
Does it have any relation to the HBO series?
I believe that the HBO. I haven't seen the HBO series.
I gotta check out this novel. I love that series. It's great.
Yeah, it is based on the Pete Dexter novel. Yes.
Okay,
Which
cool.
is really funny that I know that that's very popular, but I'm not much of a TV guy. I'm terrible with TV. But I've read that novel, and I read it for a book club, and I was like, really, we're reading a Western? I was like, come on, man. Like, there's no way I'm gonna enjoy that. Dude, it's graphic.
Yeah.
It's dark.
Oh, dude, in the show they're cursing left and right. I'm not sure if it's like that in the book. Yeah.
I mean, it's not. Well, okay, yeah. I mean, there's Calamity Jane. This isn't a spoiler, but Calamity Jane is like something else, man. And when I did my book club interview or meeting, we did a Zoom meeting, and I was like, I really like Calamity Jane as a character because she was like this badass kind of feminine, hardcore chick. And they were like, no, she was annoying. And I was like, the only one that thought she was really fun. So that's interesting. If you guys ever read it, let me know if you enjoy Calamity Jane's character. Because I was like, I thought she was well written, and she was fun, and she would cuss and shoot up, just be silly. And so, all right, what's your 19?
That's awesome, man. Yeah. So okay, cool. My number 19 is a much more I guess the Curse of Camp Kolick is well known, but kind of forgotten. This book is not forgotten, I know, and many people, everyone's almost heard of it, I think. Everyone who grew up around like the same age as us. It's Hatchet by Gary Paulsen.
Oh,
This
great
is
book, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So this is just I won't really get into the synopsis of this. It's basically I don't mean this in like a slight in any way. It's essentially kind of like Castaway for a younger audience. It
Yeah.
is it is and I think I read this when I was around 10 to 12, and it is the first novel that I got to read that navigated themes such as like death, isolation, self-confidence, perseverance, and it really was something that I'll never forget because my mom bought it from me. I remember from Barnes and Nobles, and she wanted me to get more into reading like like well-written fiction. And I think this was a Newbery Prize nominee,
Oh
and
yeah.
I must have won something else. I'm not sure what, but I loved it instantly. I reread it I think 3 times in a row. And I found out looking at it this week that it's part of a series which I didn't know. Yeah.
About
And
to be busted
yeah,
out.
so that's just another excuse for me to reread it like now that I'm a grown man. But people really hate this book on Goodreads for some reason, and they hate on the fact that it's very repetitive and it's very basic. I think reading books geared towards children as an adult and sliding it for it being very easy to read and understandable and not as mature is just very stupid to me, if I'm being honest.
Oh, that
So
makes absolute no
that makes me
sense.
appreciate it more, and it makes me feel like if I ever have kids one day, I will this is like the kind of book I'd want them to read because it forces them kind of to start forming their own thoughts about like the world in a very like age appropriate way. And I had to include it because it really is it really means a lot to me, man. I remember the atmosphere. Paulsen's a great writer.
Yes.
Forget about like being a children's book, man. Go pick it up now. The atmosphere and setting he creates is just terrific. It made me completely afraid of being alone for a while, and just the thought of even I won't spoil this, although it might be in the Goodreads synopsis, but even the way why the plane crashes, and I think he's on his way to Canada in the story. Why it crashes, how he deals with it, what he thinks of uh, why it crashes, like own character's thoughts on that. It's very very dark for
Oh yeah.
and it's beautifully done, and yeah, it has to be in my top 20. So I put it at number 19.
Oh, I'll never forget that one too. That was a great story. Definitely, if you guys have not read that, check that one out. It was outstanding. So, number 18 for me is actually the book that I added today, and I have not filmed a video for it yet. I don't know what to think. I read Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door, and what a roller coaster ride that is. I don't know what to say really. I do not recommend this book. Just maybe find it on your own. It is not for the weak stomach person. And it's the reason why that it sits with me so much is that it's not a horror novel where somebody is writing a fiction scene, like a piece of fiction where there is graphic abuse or violence being done to children. It is not a fictional tale of this. It is based on a true story. I haven't dug any more into it because really, frankly, I don't think I can handle any more of it today. But yeah, Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door was one of the most horrible books I've ever read, but also in my top 20. So put that into perspective. I don't know I can't even put my mind around it. But you caught a girl named
Excuse me.
Meg,
Yeah.
and
Oh, like yeah, dude. I mean,
I don't even know, man. Save me,
oh,
because
well, I mean,
man,
man, I feel it is I read that book I think 2 years coming out of high school, and this is when I was already into a lot of true crime podcasts. And if you guys want to hear my thoughts more about true crime, I did a chat with Spooky Noodles over at his channel, and that's one of the things we touched on. But I'm not going to get into that. But this book in particular, I remember watching the movie first, and it's easily, I did not know it was a true story when I saw it. So I was like, man, that is one messed up exploitation flick. And I'm like, this is really one of the darkest coming of age stories I've read, and like it made me think like, does this happen? And I was beyond disgusted and shocked to find how much stuff is actually on the case that the movie was inspired by. And then I found out about Jack Ketchum's book, and I ended up reading it, and I was like, I feel it's going to be weird to say this following up what you just said. I think it is a must read for anyone who does not believe that this world, that does not believe in bad luck. So I
Yeah.
think, wouldn't you agree? I think it is a must read for people who want to know what some people have to go through in life, and just to know that appearances are probably the most deceiving thing ever. And that's all I can say, really. That's all I will say. It is not a book you're going to enjoy, and that can be said about half the stuff that Ketchum puts out.
Yeah.
His writing, you come for the writing, and you either stay or leave for the story. That's how I'll describe a Ketchum book.
You know, after I posted my review today for it, and I agree with what you're saying. If you are a person who maybe lives your life a little more naive to the fact that there's monsters that can be next door, then definitely this is a book for you, because it opens your eyes, or refreshes your eyes. I've always known that there's insane people, but it refreshes your mind that, man, there's people out there that have it way worse than you. And but yeah, it's hilarious. This book is a poster child for a good book that is under a 4.0 on Goodreads. This is don't look at the reviews. It's worth a read if you have a strong stomach, but the amount of 1 to 2 star ratings for this book is honestly blasphemy, because just because you DNF'd it because you couldn't handle it doesn't mean it's not a good story.
And I don't even want to get into that aspect of it, because that actually sickens me to my stomach. You have these people, and I'm not going to get too into this, but people who clearly have read the premise of the book, and you DNF'ing it, I think, is a disrespect to not only Jack Ketchum's attempt to depict what this girl went through for you, but it's disrespect to the girl too, because what you're saying is, I understand if people DNF it and don't rate it at all, or give it a 4 or a 5, because they're saying this is exceptionally well written, it's very well told. I just cannot read what this person went through. That I is 100% agree with that sentiment. What I disagree with is you giving 1 star to something that happened to it happened to someone in real life, unless you feel like no one should write about this kind of thing, which I also disagree with anyone who thinks that, but that's a personal opinion, I guess. But yeah, you guys definitely take Josh is not like saying this lightly. It's really, really knowing now that you know it's a true story and you go into it, it's going to make everything you read a lot worse. And also, if you read one of his other books, I'm pretty sure it might be based on a true story. I'm not sure. It might not, actually, because of how crazy it is, but it's called The Woman. That is equally messed up. The movie of that, film adaptation of that, is extremely well done. Absolutely one of the most horrifying things I've seen. So if you want to read an author who is not afraid of showing you just, here you go, how messed up this world is on a platter, and you want it to be well written, then Jack Ketchum is your guy. If that doesn't sound, if you even have doubts about whether you want to read it or not, absolutely do not read it.
Yeah, that goes without saying. That is definitely the case. That is not a joke. It was.
And let me ask you something. Having read the book, do you think you'd ever want to check out the film adaptation?
Not at all. Not a single part of me want. Visually, I couldn't see it. I wouldn't be able to sit through it. I honestly, I put the book down six times. I was like, can I continue reading this? And I was like, you know what? I respect the author because of that's a bold story to write. He's got some cojones to sit down and be like, I'm going to write this girl's story because it needs to be told. And I respect the hell out of Jack Ketchum for that. R.I.P. And yeah, so yeah.
Oh yeah,
no,
dude.
I don't think I can watch the movie. So
yeah, and I'd recommend someone, if you're gonna start with one or the other. It's weird because on one hand, and you like someone who wants to check out the story for sure. If you go with the Ketchum version, you're gonna have to force yourself to read prolonged passages of very messed up stuff, and you're gonna be with the book and the story for a while. Obviously, if you check out the film version, it's only I think it's less than 2 hours. You can skip it if you want, and just to get the story in. But they don't shy away from showing anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool, man. Okay, so I guess I'll get into
that got dark and deep.
Yeah, it got very, very dark and deep. And I guess it is, and that's the biggest thing that can be said as a compliment to Jack Ketchum is it's the subject matter that you despise. You'll never revisit it again, and yet you had to include it in your top 20.
It deserves it, but it was, you know what? He nailed what he was going for. That's all I gotta say. Good job, Jack Ketchum.
Yeah. All right, cool, man. My number 18 is a YA novel.
Wow, what a change up.
Yeah. Okay, so it's called The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. This is one of the ones, because the synopsis is so short, I will read it to you because it'll just give you an example of, wow, this is YA just off the premise alone. The House of the Scorpion. With undertones of vampires, Frankenstein, dragons' hordes, and killing fields, Matt's story turns out to be an inspiring tale of friendship, survival, hope, and transcendence. A must-read for teenage fantasy fans. This is part horror, part thriller, part fantasy, part sci-fi. This is basically extremely well-written, age-appropriate bizarro for people who are like in 7th grade and up, man. And if that doesn't sound just, you know what I mean, amazing to anyone, then I don't know what else to say. This book, I read it when I was in 8th grade and did a book report on it. The teacher had never heard of this book, and she ended up reading the book next month and told me, wow, you weren't wrong in your book report. Like this is one of the best books I've ever read, and it won tons of prizes. It's phenomenal characters. It's very mature prose for a YA novel, and this is not a slight to YA, but it's just a fact. I think no one will disagree with the fact that prose is not something usually that YA, the YA industry focuses on that much. But Nancy Farmer knocks it out of the park. It's extremely well written. The atmosphere is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I remember being actually having to take breaks because of how morbid and just suffocating like just the opening chapters are. And it's something that adults can enjoy as well. It's extremely dark in a lot of places. The themes include defining the characteristics of what makes us human, how we should be proud of our individual differences, isolation, and tackling fear of the unknown. So I think The House of the Scorpion is just a gem that never gets talked about. Everyone should read it. And the only thing is I remember the plot being very confusing, so I took a look on the good old Goodreads to see what people have to say about it. And surprisingly, it's still rated very well. The people who don't like it slight it just based on that one aspect, the plot being very confusing. And I think it is just that their expectations for a YA novel were a little different. And it is very dense literature for YA. So that is why it earns a place on this list. And I believe it's the only YA novel, excluding you know what I mean? Hatchet is not YA. That's much really for children, actually, which is what makes that more amazing. But yeah.
Shout out to YA. Not enough YA booktubers out here. Yeah, let's start it up.
Absolutely, man. We'll do the young adult worth reading section. I'm just kidding.
There you go. See, we can do a whole top 10 on YA. I'm sure we've read enough.
Absolutely, man. And just props to Nancy Farmer. I've never read anything else by her, but I should check her out. I
actually should check that one out.
Absolutely, man. The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer is my number 18. Cool.
I keep taking notes. Every book you say, man, I'm over here noting. I don't know if you see it, but I'm taking notes.
I'm like adding Parasite milk to my shopping cart right now. No,
yo, Parasite milk is great. So next up is number 17 for me, and that's going to be Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I'll keep it kind of short. It's basically Hunger Games, but like the guy version. And by that I mean there's a male main character. Not that it's, but yeah, and it's awesome. Basically, you got kids killing kids, and you have this gentleman who, it's a class-based system, so there's different colors of people, and so there's a red race, a yellow race, a blue race, a gray. I might be getting the colors wrong, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So basically, the red is the bottom, and then they have the gold, which is the top. The gold are the perfect people. And this guy's goal in the beginning of the book, this is the first chapter pretty much, is to infiltrate the golds and basically try to make his people not oppressed anymore. So it's really fast-paced sci-fi, and it reads easy. There's not a lot of high, crazy science. There's a little bit of political intrigue, which I like in my science fiction because it's all nonsense and not real life. And it's just great. It's great sci-fi, and if you are interested in trying sci-fi along with Blake Crouch, Pierce Brown's novels are really easily accessible, and they're a great read. So
Awesome, man. What was the title again? Sorry.
that's Red Rising by Pierce Brown.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I now it clicked with me. I saw it a lot on your Goodreads at first. During I followed your updates. You weren't sure exactly how you were, what you were like, what kind of score you're going to go with, but I mean, now what a twist! It's on your top 20. So that premise alone sounds epic. So
the reason
definitely
why
sounds like my kind of sci-fi. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it is. The reason why, the more it sat with me, and this might be a case of I started the next book, and the first couple chapters fixed the one problem I had in the first book, which was less of a setting. You almost were dropped into this, and not you didn't. It was more character driven and not plot and setting driven. Which with sci-fi and fantasy, you tend to want to go setting and plot, as opposed to like heavy characters, which is nowadays they are doing that more. But back in the day with classic fantasy and sci-fi, which is what I kind of grew up reading, was they're more setting, politics, deep science, and things like that. So I was kind of looking for that when I picked it up, and that's wrong. Don't go into that wanting that. It's more of a newer age sci-fi thriller is what I would say. It's more of a sci-fi thriller, not traditional classical sci-fi. So yeah. So the more it sat with me, it grew on me. It was like one of those things. So
Dude, it's awesome, man. And I guess one thing we forgot to mention, and you bring up a good point, is this is something you read recently. This list obviously will change for us, I think, every 2 to 3 years because we read so much that it's bound to. We're bound to find the next great thing. So, but dude, that sounds awesome. And like, yeah, I'm glad. Like, it's so cool, like discovering a new author, right? That you just like vibe with really well.
Oh yeah. I went and read out. I was finishing up the last couple chapters of Red Rising, and I was like, I got to see what happens next. And I love that feeling. And I was like, wife, we have to go to Barnes and Noble tomorrow because I need to get it, and I can't wait for Amazon to drop it off. So we got to do it. And at that time, all the local bookstores, shout out to those people, were still closed. So hopefully they can open back up soon. But
yeah, dude, I miss shopping for books in person. I need to go do that sometime.
It's great. Even with the mask, it's great. So yeah, it's fun. So.
Exactly. Awesome, dude. Well, I guess so. Sounds like more of a sci-fi and fantasy kid, right? In terms of like what you got into. Yeah, I was more of, I think, not horror until like I said, like Goosebumps and stuff. But this was kind of like when I was into my horror phase, which I guess why it's easily my favorite Sherlock Holmes novel. It's The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This book is absolutely fantastic. If you guys want to know what brilliant storytelling, brilliant writing, iconic characters, all this, just how well everything reads together, check out The Hound of the Baskervilles. It's definitely his creepiest, easily this dude's creepiest story involving Sherlock Holmes of all time. The atmosphere he creates surrounding this this really messed up legend about this murderous hound is just amazing, and it totally freaked me out as a kid. I used to read this book at night. I remember it took me about like a week to get through, just because of how creeped out I'd get. And I got a nightmare one time, I remembered, and it's not like straight up horror. I'm not gonna like mismarket it, but I also don't want to spoil it. The characters, the red herrings in the book are all very well done. It's what can I say? It's just a classic mystery novel, and I don't read any more of those these days, and I don't think they're that popular anymore. And I think part of the reason is just, Conan Doyle just buried the whole genre with his stuff because it's so epic, man. It's so good, and this easily is the most fun I've had. It's the most fun I've had reading one of his books. Usually they're much more dense and heady and reserved for like an adult audience just because of how mature everything is, the prose and everything. But this was the unabridged version I read. It was a ton of fun and I enjoyed it. I learned a lot of new words, and it's just I think
yeah,
it's
that's always fun.
yeah, dude, it's a masterpiece, and I think it's some things to be said about just being the author to create one of the most iconic characters in all of literature. So I had to include it in my top 20. So
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, so that's pretty much it for that one. And I read this as an eighth grader, and it was a little too young, I think, in terms of like the brain power required to process the unabridged version. But it is a totally worth checking out for anyone who hasn't, and just to get a taste of what old school, well done mystery is. And it
I gotta
doesn't
check
feel,
that out. Yeah.
it's not, this isn't a slight to Agatha Christie because she's cool too, but this does not feel, this is much more so in the literary realm, and it's very
That's cool.
very just it's a masterpiece in my opinion as a mystery novel. So that The Hound of the Baskervilles.
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Awesome. We're on 16, correct?
Yep. Yeah. 16.
All right. So that one is going to be Recursion by Blake Crouch. He has made an appearance in the Syon's mentions list,
Oh,
and
absolutely,
yeah,
man. And like I said, it would have been in the top 5 if I finished it before this video.
exactly. So what you're gonna do is once you finish Dark Matter, give it a
Yeah.
little bit, and then you gotta try Recursion. It does get knocked by. I've seen other booktubers and like reviewers, hardcore reviewers that have read his other stuff. It is um, based on the way that it reads. I disagreed. I loved it. I had fun because I like his style. I just like Blake Crouch's style. So if you read Dark Matter, you're gonna love it. But basically, recursion it deals with the Mandela, and basically there's science involved where they create some machine and they start having false memories.
Wow.
So it's really cool. It's really cool. I don't want to spoil anything because his stories are so twisty turny and like thriller, just really just gritty. But there was a scene in this that yeah, I don't even want to spoil anything, man. Blake Crouch, if you enjoy his work, try this one out. I do have to say, based on the pacing and the fact that it's similarly structured as a story, it does come off repetitive if you read it right after Dark Matter, if that makes sense.
Okay. I mean, but that I guess I'm only halfway through Dark Matter, but I guess I
Yeah,
don't want to spoil it for anyone. We need to
yeah,
talk about it
yeah.
separately.
We'll talk
But
about it after.
yeah,
Yeah,
but I could understand what you mean by like what happens in Dark Matter, and just based on the premise of this machine that creates false memories. So like, but that already sounds awesome to me, and like,
yeah. See, you know
I,
exactly what I'm talking about without us spoiling it.
dude,
Uh,
I'm a total slave when it comes to grounded sci-fi plots like that, and knowing how he writes, it is all you've sold me just by saying Blake
yeah,
Crouch and false memories. So I'm like, I'm in.
yeah, exactly. Because it's not overly scientific. He just writes. He has an idea of where he wants with like using it in a horrific manner. Like this science was created, and now what is mankind going to do with it? It's probably not going to go well. And that's kind of how Blake Crouch writes, basically. So, yeah. So, all right.
Yeah, dude, awesome. Like, dude, he's like I will say this, because even though I didn't include him in the top 20, I have no problem saying he's in my top 5 favorite authors of all time. Not even having finished one of his books. He's that good, guys.
He's a
Definitely,
must buy for
definitely,
me.
yeah, exactly. I can't imagine giving any of his books less than 3 stars, even if the story was horrible, just based on the how someone can come up with such like a dense plot. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's very smart. I honestly, I'm like, I try to find other authors that may even touch the type of storylines that he does, and it's impossible. I just need him to drop another book because I enjoy it so much. So,
Awesome, dude. Okay, cool. So my number 16, this is a very interesting because it's a very interesting story of how I found out about this book. I'll read you the brief synopsis from Goodreads first, so everyone gets a taste of what it's about. A child seeking to avenge the wrongs perpetrated on his parents. Young-Soo Park's genius, born into the turmoil of post-war Korea, is used as a puppet by the South Korean government before being banished to America. From a remote New York City ghetto, the boy wages a clandestine guerrilla war against all symbols of authority. Park renders his vision of late 20th century global culture with the bold, surreal strokes of Pynchon, that is Thomas Pynchon, and the wild political sensibilities of Goddard. The painful,
wow.
largely unmapped narrative territory of boy genius creates a gripping, harrowing read. Now, that sounds epic and awesome and so unique. The reason I read it, I went to an after-school program when I was 10 years old. The director of the program was friends with this author, who is also a filmmaker now, I found out, who lives in New York City. He introduced me to the guy just because he was chilling in class. So the director introduced me to this author. I was 10 years old. I didn't even know. I was like, what's up? It's awesome. This dude, having heard what the book is about, this dude gifted me a copy of his book as a 10-year-old dude. And the cover is this small little kid holding him an AK like this, and it's like
Badass.
animated. Yeah. Needless to say, I read 2 pages, like the first chapter, and I just put it down when I was 10. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I was like, cool though. The cover's cool, you know. But I read it again when I was 15 in high school and was instantly blown away completely. This is the first book I read that was very adult. The language is extremely hoarse. It is very dense, like you just heard, and there's really Young-Soo Park explores themes of just rebellion, society, culture, and especially how youth is viewed by the general public in really severe detail. And I loved every page. I remember reading this in high school, and I was like, I felt like I had a treasure forever because it's such a unique way. This book was. I was graced with this book in such a cool way, dude. And I was like, man, wow, like I'm
Talk
so
about authors
grateful.
having cojones.
And
That was
now, yeah, dude, and I'm sure this author is going to be grateful because hopefully he's never going to listen to this, obviously somehow. But I guess if his name is tagged in in the timestamps, but dude, you're an amazing writer. This dude, no one even he has 2 followers on Goodreads, which just goes to show you, like, yeah, it's kind of sad, but everyone needs to check this guy out, man. Young-Soo Park, boy genius. Go pick up this book if you want just a really dark, entertaining, ballsy really messed up coming of age story. Yeah, boy genius.
that's
Young-Soo
awesome.
Park. Yeah, dude.
That's a
Okay,
great
cool.
story.
That was my number 16.
Nice.
Yeah.
So number 15 for me is going to be Tuesdays with Maury. This is also kind of a high school story for me. I read it. It was the perfect time for a story. Sometimes when you pick up a book and you actually get into it and you're like, what the heck, man? This is like speaking to me, and that's why it's always going to have a special place for me. I had just recently lost some people that were important to me in my life, and yeah, Tuesdays with Maury, man. I can't even remember really like anything about the story. I just remember how much it hit me, and it's just one of those books that sticks in my head that I'm like, yeah, Mitch Albom's Tuesdays with Maury, as a mainstream book that people read in high school, definitely is a classic for me. So yeah, you just deal with loss and just how to handle it, and really the writing was.
Because I've heard of it so much, man. I've never read it. Do you mind telling me, like, really briefly what it's about, or would it spoil?
No, I'll just read the synopsis.
Okay, cool.
Dude, it's been so long. It's the first thing when you type 2 into Goodreads. It's the first thing that comes up. So yeah, maybe it was a grandparent or a teacher or a colleague, someone older, patient and wise, who understood you when you were young and searching and gave you sound advice to help you make your way through it. For Mitch Albom, that person was Maury Schwartz, his college professor from nearly 20 years ago. Now it's coming back to me. Maybe like Mitch, you lost track of that mentor as you made your way and the insights faded. Wouldn't you like to see that person again? Ask the bigger questions that still haunt you. So, yeah. So basically, I can finish that. Basically, yes, it's a real story about a college professor that Mitch Albom had, who was a sports writer, Mitch Albom. And then he decided to write this book about his college professor that really made an impact on him in college, that was a really good role model for Mitch Albom. And then as his teacher was getting older, and as we get older, we usually pass away. That's how human beings work. And so he reconnected with him and kind of was able to give his high school professor, tell him basically how much of an impact he made on his life. Dude. And it's just, there's no hiding it. It says right in the story, right in the synopsis. Basically, it's a story about life as a whole. And if you haven't read Tuesdays with Morrie, it's worth reading. It'll make you cry.
Dude, I'm definitely gonna read it, because what you just said, like the premise, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of holding back tears, because that's premise alone, what a thing to write, like as a student of someone you look up to and respect. Like, wow, that sounds really like deep and powerful.
It's hard for me to even talk about this
intimate one. Yeah, dude, because I'll give him a shout out right here, I guess. Funny enough, he's a mystery and thriller author. He's the only professor I'll ever remember from my time at NYIT, and I didn't graduate from there. I left after about 2.5 years, but I took English 2 research writing there, and I found the professor's name was John Misak. You guys can check him out on Amazon. He writes the Keegan Detective series. He was the only professor up till that point who told me I wasn't a bad student just because I didn't care about most subjects. I did very well in that class. He told me never stop writing, and I never did, and I'm glad I listened to him. So he doesn't have a big audience, but he writes several novels and stuff on Amazon. So definitely, I just wanted to give him a shout out, because I got to check out that book, man.
Yeah, it'll hit you. It'll hit you because he tackles all that stuff, Yeah. It literally on the front, an old man, a young man, and life's greatest lesson. So yeah, Mitch Albom did a good job with that one. So that was my number 15 selection.
Awesome, dude. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's just, that's really when we recall, right, what writing is supposed to be about, is just when you totally connect with words on a page. Words on a page can move you like that, man. That's the biggest compliment, I think. And obviously it's something not seen in, like, it's not a slight, it's just not part of the horror genre or thriller genre. But when you read something that's supposed to speak to you that way, and it does, that's like magic, basically.
Oh yeah, and it's very short. I think it's very short. It's like 150 pages. So that's literally, like you said, that's what the goal is when you read it. So yeah, awesome book.
Amazing, dude. Awesome. Cool. Okay, cool. My number 15. Again, transitioning from very deep subject matter. My number 15 is one of the most underrated, fun, really well-conceived, suspenseful, slow burn thriller novels of all time. In my opinion, it's by an author who's frequently just made fun of, disrespected, and maybe rightfully so for some of his content. Not disrespected and made fun of, but like just people don't enjoy him that much. But you might be able to guess what I'm talking about. It's Night in the Lonesome October by Richard Lehman. That's my
There you go.
number 15, man. Night in the Lonesome October. I read this one about 3 months ago, and it was my second experience with Layman. The first one was very much so more a horror one. It was a book called Savage, which is an awesome, dark adventure story having to do with Jack the Ripper. And it's
Yeah,
so
that's a
well conceived, man. Yeah, I definitely highly recommend that one, but it's not on the list or anything, or even in the honorable mentions. Night in the Lonesome October. If you were ever a kid or like a high schooler, so older kid or a high schooler who frequently just likes spending time on your own at night, especially, you will love this book. Nothing brutal happens for most of the story, and even when it does happen, I don't want to spoil anything. It's just it's one of the stories where you're not sure about anything as you're reading the whole thing, and usually that's like, subtlety and suspense is not what Layman is known for. Let's be honest, right? He's
yeah.
known for just being one of the founding fathers of like the splatter genre, but this story is just it's a truly terrifying, unpredictable, and suspenseful reading experience. All the characters in this novel, this is something Richard Layman never gets credit for. The dialogue is so funny in this. It is very non-PC. I'm warning you guys. So, and think of it
Oh
was
yeah.
written a while ago. The dialogue in this is so witty, it's sharp, it's hilarious, and it's brutally honest, and just makes you feel like you're going to school with these guys. It's so well done, dude.
That's awesome.
He doesn't shy away from detailing any vulgar or crass thoughts. Things that seem tame or unimportant to the story all of a sudden become horrifying in when you least expect it. So, and oftentimes this is considered to be his best novel by many people, right behind The Traveling Vampire Show, which I've never read. But if you guys want a really fun, a really entertaining, funny, well-paced, suspenseful thriller, you guys got to check out Night in the Lonesome October by Richard
That's
Layman.
awesome.
That's my number 15.
I gotta read that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So number 14 for me is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, this is the first in his Kingkiller Chronicles series, which also is followed up by The Wise Man's Fear. This is the one that kind of started it for me with him. His prose there's a reason it took 7 years to write. He shows that it took 7 years to write. And that's honestly, when I get into fantasy, that's what I really like to see is those authors that just put in that time with their prose. So you follow a Kavoth, and the cool part about this story is that it is him as a retired person. Basically, he just works at a bar, and there's a person called the Chronicler, and he came to his bar basically to write his life story. So Kavoth is telling this guy who's going to write a story about him what happened years ago. So it's written that type of way, and it's super neat. It's very cool. You go to like a school. It's kind of like Hogwarts, but a little bit more, way cooler in my opinion. No offense to Harry Potter, but like it's more action. So, but I'd say big knock for me. The more it sits on me is the main characters got a lot of teenage angst, and it comes off like, just like you're kind of screaming at the page, like, dude, just like kiss the girl already. You know what I mean? Like things like that. So it's interesting. It's a good book, but yeah, if you haven't checked out Patrick Rothfuss, don't do it. And wait until he releases the third book. That's what I would suggest.
Dude,
he's a great guy, but don't do it to yourself because you're going to be waiting. You might. It's honestly, he doesn't know if he's ever going to be able to finish it. He doesn't know how to. So that's what he said. He actually said that. So
yeah, based on like what the premise been, it sounds like something I normally wouldn't go out of my way to read. But the fact that it's cool that you're putting it on your top 20 and recommending it to me, I absolutely will check it out because I trust your taste when it comes to this kind of genre. But awesome,
you just
man.
might want to put it on the back burner for a while, in my opinion. It's just wait and see if it finishes, because if not, you're left in a cliffhanger for 7 years.
Yeah.
Don't want that. So
yeah, that reminds me of, it's totally unrelated genre. It reminds me of the creator of this really dark manga called Berserk, and he's notorious for just creating amazing stuff, but he's never finished the series yet, I think. So yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. So
Yeah.
that was my number 14 for it.
Awesome, dude. Cool. Okay. My number 14 is a guy that everyone needs to check out more. He's with one of the biggest bizarre and hardcore horror publishing houses in our community, but people just don't talk about him, I see. John Wayne Communale's Scummer. That is my number 14. It is easily one of the best books I've ever read in my life. It's about a filthy barfly who basically he lives off leftovers. He drinks people's stuff when they're not looking. He's in the bathroom constantly, and this is all relevant, which is why I'm mentioning it. And it's about an outsider who becomes infatuated with how free this guy is with being so vile and disgusting. And it is a disgusting and extremely well told, unpredictable story. John Wayne Communale's literary voice, dude, it is so confident. It is so unique and confident when he writes. I love the way he writes. It sounds like he's just had it but he still wants to. It's like he's showing off, but being very laid back at the same time. It's very actually literary. And I say surprisingly because it's coming out of Grindhouse Press, where I know you have people like Samantha Kolesnik, but it still shocked me for sure, especially when you don't see a literary voice paired with such depraved subject matter. And
Awesome.
it's just, it has a rebellious attitude throughout the whole thing. And to me, this was a twisted celebration of embracing rock bottom, basically. That's what it is. It's about smiling at how average your life seems and learning to strip away judgment from everyone and everything. And obviously, this is not a guide to live your life in the best way possible, but when you're feeling really down, that's when I feel you should check out this book because it will hit you the hardest. And it's when I checked it out. And the characters in this book, man, are repulsive, but because of how repulsive they are, and he writes them in a way that he makes it sound like you know people like this, even though you really won't, just because of the level of depravity that these people engage in. They draw you in completely, and it's totally nihilistic, and it has fun with that. It's totally unapologetic, and most of all, being a Grindhouse Press book, I have to give it kudos for having two scenes that are so outlandishly messed up. I'm warning you guys right now. If you get through the first few pages of this, you might feel you can continue on because the first few pages right off the bat are disgusting beyond belief. You have no clue what's in store. The middle has one of the most disgusting thing I've ever read by far, and it's very well written though. It's imaginative. It's beautiful. I'll never forget it. And the ending is extremely messed up and depraved as well. But yeah, this book reminds you it just reminds you to laugh at how much life sucks once in a while. So that's why I recommend Scummer by John Wayne Communale.
I gotta try him. I did recently pick up one of his novellas, so I definitely need to check him out. And he seems like a super chill guy too.
Oh
so
yeah, dude, he's super talented,
huge,
hardworking, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a podcast on here too that is worth checking out. Well, it's like him and his buddy just putting up YouTube videos, and they only have like 22 subs. So definitely check out him.
I will, man. Yeah. Absolutely.
So number 13 for me is going to be a recent read also. It's The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. I see a lot of up and down reviews for this one. Me as a fantasy fan, this hit me a little differently because it was kind of a little bit of both. It kind of made me feel like it was Halloween night and like I was a child, and that you just really follow this group of friends, and it tackles a little bit of deeper things in life that children don't fully understand. And I think I seen kind of what Ray Bradbury was going for a little bit with that one, and I enjoyed it. And also just the adventure of it. It's really a fun, peaceful read, and I can't wait to like read it to my child someday. It's just timeless, I think, and really Ray Bradbury. I need to read more of him because yeah, he's really good, and I think Yeah, it goes without saying. Ray Bradbury. I mean, what else can you say?
Yeah, it's a crime I haven't checked it out, man, because now it's in your top 20. I hear about it all the time. I just love anything, dude. October's coming up. I'm going to check it out because anything that reminds me of. It's been a while since I've checked out a book that reminded me of how fun and happy Halloween's supposed to be. So I think that'll be the perfect book for that,
And
right?
this one is honestly it because you're in the group of boys. It just puts you back at like Halloween where you're running down the street and you got your sack of candy and you're ready for Halloween, you know. And these kids basically they just get this adventure that they really weren't bargained for. Or that wasn't the plan when they left the house that day, but it was a lot of fun. You got to read it for yourself. I don't want to spoil anything because of the fact it's not very long, and I actually listened to the audiobook for it, and that might have also added to my enjoyment level. It might be a better audiobook than because it's very theatrical with the events that happen. It's very, very fantastical and just there's a lot of stuff going on. So it was definitely a great audiobook to read. So that was my number
And
13 selection, Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree.
awesome. I have another question for you on that. Have you read? I have not read any Bradbury. So have you read any of his other stuff?
I have not read like the ones that everybody knows about, like Fahrenheit 451. I haven't read.
Okay.
I've read a couple short stories of his, and then I read The Zen and the Art of Writing, which is his writing story.
Oh,
And
you did read that. I saw that recently. Yeah.
yeah, there's some tips in there that I mean, it's not a top 20 fiction read, but if
Yeah.
you're an author, if we were going to have an author top five nonfiction books you should read,
Yeah.
is Zen and the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury is up there because of the fact that he gives you some tips that he did that I've never heard other authors do. Like I've never heard of like he would have a list and he would get a notebook and he would write on each page a title of a whatever, a story that he wants to write. It would just be The Tree, and then he would write the Halloween tree based on it. Who does that? I don't even know how that works, but he said it gives you a writing prompt without even trying. So that's I feel like just because he's so talented,
Yeah, I think that's the
that
part.
works.
I think you missed that part, Bradbury. It's like,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
just sit down and like write about this thing and
But really,
make a classic book about it. It's not it's that
that's
just try that.
that's what it was. There was a whole passage on it, and I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, you know what? I mean, I guess that works if you're Ray Bradbury, but for most layman, average people, like
Sounds
I
like
don't
the most insightful, least helpful book you can read.
exactly. So take that with a grain of salt. But the parts that I really enjoyed were when the more uplifting, like, hey, you can do this. You
Okay.
know, Ray Brad, he's like, I made a career out of writing hundreds of short stories. When you think about it, he wrote The Martian Chronicles is short stories,
And
so
October Country is another short story collection, I think. Yeah.
exactly. So he says in that, he's like, you don't have to be a novelist in the traditional sense. You can write hundreds of stories and make a living, which I
Hey
thought
man, I
was
know for like you and me, man, we talk all the time. Like, dude, if I could release a novella in my lifetime, I'll be happy. And I have so much fun writing short stories. They take a while for me to write. I'm a very slow writer, but yeah, hearing someone like Bradbury, just you know, reinforce that belief that you're not a fake writer if you don't write novels. It's a very comforting thing to hear, coming from one of the best writers of all time. But yeah.
yep.
Okay, so my number 13 is a novel that was a novella, I should say, that was released recently. It's by none other than Edward Lorne. Everyone in this community knows who he is. And the novella is South of Here. Although this has like a really high rating on Goodreads, the reviews sing a different tune when I looked into them. People really had a problem with the subject matter he chose to explore in this one. It's basically about a man who goes to visit his father after a long time who was a pedophile, and his father lives in a park filled with other pedophiles, and they hold meetings talking about their feelings, how it's like to be like, you know what I mean, just apart from society. Right there, it's very, very messed up subject matter, and he holds nothing back. I'm just going to state that. So if just base that on that alone doesn't sound like something you'd be comfortable reading, don't check it out. I think the way he goes about talking about the things he does in this book is extremely well done. It is easily one of the most well-written pieces of fiction I've ever read. It is very, very honest. There's not a character in this book that did not feel like a real person. I'm talking about the person at the gas station working. It is so well done. It is Edward Lorne. I've only read, the only other book I've read by him is Life After Dane, and that was a masterpiece too, in my opinion. It's not good enough. I didn't love it enough to put it in my top 20, but I'd easily say it is one of the best serial killers novels I've ever read in my life. And this wasn't horror at all. It is absolutely horrifying, the subject matter, but this is going to sound like some pretentious bullshit, but it truly is the best way I can describe it. It's a very somber and courageously written meditation on what being a broken person means. That's what this is about. And if you want to read a slice of life story that I don't think very few authors will cover this subject matter, so you might as well go with an author who's a very good storyteller. And I feel you'll either be totally taken aback in the first few pages of just who the main protagonist of the story is, the best person you'll read about. So, and you'll know how messed up it is, me saying that, when you start to read it. But I'm just happy this book exists, because I feel this is subject matter that's very fascinating to read about. It's not enjoyable in the slightest, but it's so well fleshed out for a novella. It's rare to find character work this good in a novella, and he really did a great job with this, man. So I definitely feel south of here, just based on it being a novella, the characters, and how well he was able to traverse the subject matter without it seeming exploitative. Or exploitative. I never know how to pronounce that word, but South of Here by South of Here by Edward Lorne, man, number 13, easy pick right there. And yeah, cool.
It makes sense that he would write something like that, because of I follow IE for a long time, and I knew when he was a Jack Ketchum fan, and he did, when Jack Ketchum passed, he really did a heartfelt thing. It was like maybe 2-3 years ago about it, and I know that his type of fiction that he really enjoys is that the things that authors taking a risk. So that actually is that's cool that he wrote that one. I remember when he was working on that, so that sounds good. I've read The Life of Dane and Bay's End by him, and yeah, he's a great storyteller, like you said, and a great author. So
man.
Number 12 for me is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. So shout out to the YA booktubers out there.
Awesome.
Try to keep your excitement down, but I agree. That book is great. I don't know if it deserves 37 videos on my channel, but it is a great book because of when it hit for me. I was younger, and it was a good little YA piece of fiction. Kids killing kids, can't go wrong there. So like I said with Red Rising. But Hunger Games, because it kind of started a little trend there in fiction for a while. I feel like a lot of people were trying to chase her coattails and write a similar Katniss Everdeen story. Like you had the Divergent series and all that. So I thought it was cool, a little dystopian, darker fiction. So The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins.
Awesome, man. I need to revisit that book, because when I read it, I absolutely hated it for one reason. I read this book called Battle Royale beforehand, and it's hands down one of the best stories, brutal, fun, entertaining stories involving kids, basically. And it really set the bar too high for me. And I had read it, Hunger Games, right after that. So it really, and already, like I said, I'm not a huge sci-fi, dystopian fan. So I was like, this is not for me. She's a great writer for sure. That's 100% undoubtable. No one can dispute that fact. I just read it, and the timing was wrong for me. So I definitely will check out The Hunger Games eventually, because I think any author who can create, you know what I mean? Like, I have so much respect for fantasy sci-fi authors. They take so much time to flesh out their characters and story that it's definitely worth a second chance. So I'll definitely check that
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 12 is another recent read, one I know that I've hyped up to you like to no end, and I know Kevin from Wellward Beard loved it. He gave it a 4, which means he pretty much had a blast with it. It's easily my number 12. It's Perpetual Dread by Brian Boyer. So this book, man, it's so rare these days to see a work in the horror genre be handled with such a mean spirit and grim attitude. I'm not talking about like Ketchum levels of torture or anything like that. Not that he created that stuff, but you know what I mean. Brian, what makes this book so good is it reminds you of why we love what the meanest parts about horror. What horror really is supposed to mean. This is a collection of totally bleak tales that revel in the most sadistic aspects of humanity, man. Like everything from the characters to like the prose has no soul. The soul is just completely gone from page 1, and it reminds you, basically Boyer just does his best to remind you of the sheer amount of suffering this world has the potential to inflict through each and every story. And the he doesn't hold your hand at all. It is the way it's written, it's kind of like, at first it might seem like it's too no frills, the prose, because it's not like, you might say this is not well written, but once you get one or two stories in, you're like, this fits perfectly. This is super messed up. And it's
I gotta
kind of
try that
like,
one.
yeah, dude, it's just like, it's if you guys are into extreme horror, but you want an extreme horror book that's written very uniquely and really, really makes you disturbed to your very core, highly recommend Perpetual Dread. My favorite stories were Terminal, Death Valley, Family Chapel, Gift and a Curse, Drago's Crib, Teacher's Pet, Scorpio, and Like Father, Like Son. So that's my number 12.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I gotta try him out because I did see Well Red Beard's review, and I definitely gotta try that one out. I have already written that one down, so that'll be on the
Yeah, yeah,
radar for sure.
yeah, man.
But number 11 for me is actually another more literary, more prose-driven fantasy story, and it was one of the first ones I picked up a long time ago, and that is The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. Tad Williams does not get enough respect in the fantasy community. I wish people like Daniel Green and things like that would talk more about him. He deserves a lot of respect. He's well respected by other authors, but not nearly enough people read his books. I think it's because he's more classical. It's definitely not your cup of tea. I will be honest with you,
Okay,
Syon, you
cool.
would not enjoy it, but it's more of like that chosen one trope, um, more of a journey,
Okay,
a little
cool.
bit Lord of the Rings ish. But yeah, if you enjoy like the Lord of the Rings or not a Game of Thrones, but like pretty much the anti Game of Thrones, there's not a lot of drama, not any like the more of the yeah like Wheel of Time, that classical fantasy is what I'll say.
Definitely,
So yeah.
and again, my hats go off, my full respect to that kind of stuff. It's just way too large in scope for something I'll ever tackle, I know.
Oh yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
it's huge. But the Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. Tad Williams
awesome.
also has some sci-fi series, and he's just an outstanding author. And I wish more people were like, hey, yeah, Tad Williams. Also, I'd like to take this moment. Terry Goodkind passed away today. Who is it? He's along the same
Wow,
lines.
really? Yeah, I've heard of
Yeah,
Terry Goodkind. Yeah.
yeah, Terry Goodkind. All things aside, he gets some backlash on BookTube. Honestly, I think he meant good by that. What he was trying to say probably was that he never saw himself only writing one genre for his lifetime, but he was so successful at it. And shout out to him. He made a lot of people happy with his stories. So I did want to say that at some point tonight.
Uh, I
Yeah,
will always have respect for him, and this goes back to even people like not comparing them at all, but like Edward Lorne, who you might not, agree with everything they say, but the fact that someone can be so open and so strong with their convictions will always earn a place of respect in my book, and especially someone like Terry Goodkind who liked what he liked. He talked about what he liked and what he didn't like. He was very open about it, and I'm like, man, I like this guy because
Yes.
yeah, I might not be friends with him, but I definitely it makes me want to check out his work for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I own a few of the Wizard, the his series, and yeah, I haven't picked them up yet. They're pretty dense, but I know that they're well loved and well respected. So yeah, R.I.P.
Okay, so my number 11 is Gristle and Bone by Duncan Ralston. Everyone in this community is familiar with Duncan Ralston. He's an awesome dude. Again, he has strong convictions, and I love that about him. I'm good friends with him on Twitter. And this was my first time checking his work out, and instantly, as I was reading, I was like, man, this is almost top 10 for me. Hands down, best books I've ever read. It's number 11, Gristle and Bone. Right off the bat, Jack Ketchum praised the collection. So if that doesn't tell you something, so I can't even imagine that getting
How much
praise
of
for
a
that.
compliment, man.
Yeah,
That would be.
and it's actually not extreme in nature. These are phenomenal, very deep, layered, grounded horror stories. Some are cosmic, but most of them are very, very they're based in our deepest human fears, and like just it reminds me of Brian Boyer's collection, except Ralston's prose is magnificent. It is ridiculously good. It's it actually reminds me of his writing reminds me of people like Stephen King and Cormac McCarthy put together. Like it's that good. It's not the prose is not overly poetic, but it's still kind of literary, and it makes the story flow really well. And each story is jam-packed with great character development. There's an anxiety-inducing tone throughout the whole collection. And my favorite tales were in order: Artifact number 37, Beware of the Dog, Fat of the Land, Baby Teeth, and Scavengers. So absolutely check out that collection, Gristle and
Oh
Bone.
yeah, I love Duncan Ralston's work, man. I've read a couple things by him. I enjoyed Ghostland, and yeah, I just liked it. He seems like a student of classic horror a little bit. It seems
Oh
like he
yeah,
likes to,
that
you can
story
pick up on that.
Beware of the Dog totally felt like it belonged like King wrote it. I'm not even joking, in the best way
Exactly.
possible.
Yeah, no, I kind of pick up on that with his writing. Like he's definitely a student of that. So yeah, awesome.
Cool, man. And
Can't go
now,
wrong with
okay,
Duncan
so we're gonna move into our top 10 now, guys. We're not gonna spend as much time on each of these, just because I feel these stories are not only well loved by most people, they're so just beautifully told that I feel the more blind you go in, the better it will be. So we're gonna kind of move this along a little. Okay, so you start with number 10, man.
Awesome. So number 10 is going to be The Silence by Tim Lebbon. Tim Lebbon's writing is very easy to read, and honestly, this one was just super cool because you get that sense of dread when they let out these monsters in the beginning of the book, and you just follow this little family, and there's just tons of action, man. It's such a fast-paced read, good horror, and I like Tim Lebbon, so can't go wrong there.
Awesome, man. And yeah, you loved it enough to put it in the top 10, so that I'm definitely going to check that out. Yeah.
They do a
Okay.
pretty cool Netflix movie also for it. It was a pretty good adaptation.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, I'll definitely check it out. I didn't check out that movie just because I had seen A Quiet Place and it reminded me of that. But I'll actually skip the movie and just check out the novel.
Yeah, I actually found The Silence because I liked The Quiet Place so much. I looked up books that would be similar, and The Silence is very similar. So yeah, that was my
Awesome,
number
man.
10.
Okay, my number 10. It's gonna make a lot of people happy. It's Stephen King's Salem's Lot. These vampires are doing what vampires were meant to do, and that scare the hell out of you and just prey on people. So this is one of the few Stephen King novels I finished, and this was instantly in one of the best books I've ever read. Finished it in one day, and it's a pretty thick book. I could not stop reading it. It's hands down has some of the best dialogue I've ever read. Every character in this book, no matter how small their role, is given their own story arc. their own problems, and everyone has their own unique personality streaks. The only flaw in the book is the amount. There's so many people in the story that King spends a lot of time on each of them. So it takes a while to get to the action of it all, but it makes everything all the more immersive and impressive. Just how well he was able to develop everyone. And yeah, when the vampire action does hit, it's beyond gory and brutal. It's awesome. There's a sense of adventure to everything, especially in the third act. And I was surprised by the end of how heartfelt everything is. And to me, this is a novel about conquering your deepest fears, learning to let the past stay in the past, and learning. And for me, this is something I still work on. And learning to move forward, no matter how dark your future seems. And I loved everything about this book. It's one of Stephen King's best novels, and a good place to start for him.
I'll have to try that Stephen King gentleman. I haven't heard of him before.
Yeah, he seems like he hasn't been doing it for a while, but I'll definitely check
yeah, definitely. Yeah, Salem's Lot, you can't go wrong there. So yeah, number 9 for me is, we must be in the Stephen King section of this list here. We're at The Drawing of Three by Stephen King. Now this one I really can't get into any of the storylines because it is the second book in his Dark Tower series, but it is when Roland is forming his quartet, which is his group of people that he will go on his journey with for the Dark Tower and in search of the Man in Black. So and not Johnny Cash, that it's a different Man in Black. So shout out to Johnny Cash. But yeah, so The Drawing of Three, it's awesome. There is a certain scene where my favorite main character of the story, well, he's a secondary character, but he's basically, there's 4 perspectives throughout the thing, and he's naked in this bar and having this shootout with like an entire gang of people, and it's so well written. It's Stephen King being Stephen King, and yeah, The Drawing of Three, number 9.
Amazing, dude. I'm definitely gonna check out more King.
He's just he writes things that are so out. He really just he just is out there, man. I love Stephen King.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, my number 9 is, it's about time I mentioned this author, especially on this list, is Blanky by Keelan Patrick Burke, is number 9. It's a novella. Something about the way death is portrayed in the story and grief. I've never read a book that moved me like this before, in terms just by the prose alone. Every single paragraph in the story has a quotable line. Every single one. It's hard to read actually, because you're rereading passages. You can't believe what you've just read. It's so good. He's achieved something truly special with this. And he's taken a skeleton of a concept that's in horror, has been in horror for a while, and he created an absolutely unique work of art. He succeeds in balancing moments of terror with moments of melancholy and beauty. And when it comes to novellas, man, it's really rare for me to become as emotionally invested, in the plight of these characters. And it's just amazing. The prose it really reminded me of people like Raymond Carver and Cormac McCarthy. His prose is poetic but really fast paced at the same time, and each passage, it feels like it hits you like it's supposed to, but then it doesn't overstay its welcome. He moves on, and yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece. Keelan Patrick Burke is criminally underrated. Dude is an absolute genius. Everyone needs to check out his work, and this is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. Blanky by Keelan Patrick.
Keelan Patrick Burke is so great for the community, and I need to read more of him. He is outstanding. So yeah, number 8 for me is The Fellowship of the Ring. Most people know the storyline. These stories by J.R.R. Tolkien were the groundwork for me enjoying fiction and reading for fun. So J.R.R. Tolkien, I am a person who just lives in the Shire, man. I have the soundtrack to the Lord of the Rings movie on my phone. I listen to it regularly. Howard Shore is a genius. There's just so much for those. I mean, watch the movies, read the books. The Lord of the Rings is a masterpiece of fiction. The man made entire dialects and species of people So,
Yeah, like it's just I'm thinking of it's like I'll never check it out. I'm a huge fan of Tolkien's mind, and I'm movies are some of my favorite of all time. But yeah, I mean, yeah,
yeah, yeah. And the writing is hard for people nowadays to read unless like you grew up reading it like me. Your average reader might pick it up and be like, this is just outdated and it doesn't read as. But honestly, his overall arching look at society that he went with back then, it's timeless and perfect to me.
yeah, dude. That's the biggest complaint I hear about it. Just outdated, like the writing style. But I will, you know what? This is gonna sound cheesy as heck, but I'm gonna wait till I'm like, if I live that long, until I'm like 70 man or 75, and then I'll chill out and definitely check out Tolkien and
It's
dive into Lord of the Rings for sure because he
yeah.
deserves it. But
Number 8 pick, The Fellowship, when it all began.
awesome. Okay, my number 8. It's popular in certain circles, but I think it should be read by more people, and not for the reason that people usually flaunt it for. It's Mortality by this man named Christopher Hitchens. So it's one of the most insightful and candid looks into a dying man's thoughts. He was always against religion, and he never bashed it in a very disrespectful way. For him, it's just, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's very unique and how he views the world. And his hatred is not so much for religion as it is for just humanity as a whole, and how bad people use certain things to tout their own values and belief and pressurize other people to do certain things. His convictions towards his beliefs and thoughts about what living a good life means are inspirational. Wonderful prose with really well thought out sentiments about humanity. And the only thing I will add is you might be offended. You might if you're a very conservative Christian or you don't want to hear anything at all about the opposing side's arguments, then definitely probably stay away from this one. But I think for a man who's dying from esophageal cancer to be able to look death right in the face essentially and write about why he's not worried about it at all and everything like that is truly noteworthy, and it's definitely worth the read if you think you're willing to hear his opinion. But yeah, Mortality by Christopher Hitchens.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that. That actually that sounds pretty interesting to me.
yeah,
After reading Nick's short story, that sounds pretty good to
yeah,
me.
exactly, man. Yeah.
So that was
And we're
which one?
on now. That was my number 8, so we're on your number 7 now.
All right. So number 7 for me is The Professional by W.C. Hines. This was also a shocker for me. I did not expect to like this book, but I read it very fast. You follow a boxer who is getting ready for his heavyweight championship fight, and it is in the most people's list for top 5 sports books of all time. It really dives into human nature and desires for something more. And if you just like watching, like a Rocky movie or underdog story, this one's for you. The character work was just second to none. So, The
I'll,
Professional.
I'll absolutely check it out. You know, I'm a huge boxing fan. To me, that sounds right up my alley, and the
Oh
fact
yeah,
that it's so high makes it like a must read for me.
oh yeah.
Okay,
The writing is outstanding. So,
amazing, dude. And especially if the boxing scenes are well written. Oh man, I'm really gonna be a fan. Okay, number 7 for me is Wallflower by Chad Lutzke. So another novella. I'm always going to be blown away if an author, especially a smaller author, is able to just blow my mind in such a short span of time. And this was one of those cases. Wallflower basically tells the story of a teenager who encounters a homeless guy, and he becomes obsessed with the idea of doing heroin. It's extremely heartbreaking, extremely sad. So if you are a former addict, and I am not, I have no problem disclosing that I'm not an addict, and this still hit me extremely hard in a way I was not expecting. It serves as a cautionary tale for depressed and impoverished youth who have nothing to do with their time really, And this is one of the things, sadly, and we're both New Yorkers, in Long Island we hear all the time about people just dropping like flies, man, from heroines. But the characters here are super fleshed out. You care a lot about their arcs. It has probably the most beautiful ending to a story I've ever read in terms of the writing. Lutzke is like a ridiculously good writer. His imagery is unflinching, vivid, but poetic still. He tackles everything very realistically. Nothing is glamorized, so he doesn't shy away from the darkness or the temporary light that is a result of the drug. So it's a must-read in my book, and easily number 7, Wallflower.
There you go. Yeah, Lutzke's great. We're in the Lutzke hour right now. Number 6 for me is Stirring the Sheets by Chad Lutzke.
Wow, that for everyone listening. For everyone listening, guys, I swear we did not talk about this.
It was top secret. Like, honestly, him and I, we just we got our list ready and that was it. So this is actually
awesome,
pretty
dude.
funny. But if you have not read Chad Lutzke, he is honestly one of my favorite. I don't know if he's considered indie or small press, but dude can write his butt off, and he is imaginative. And Stirring the Sheets is my personal favorite. I own most of Lutzke's work. It's dark, and and the sense of loss for the main character you feel the entire way. You're in this old man has just lost his wife, and he's just grief stricken, and it just pours out on the page. And at the time that I read this, I had just gotten married, so the scenes were even more vivid, because you're just like, oh my God, could you imagine 70 years from now losing your spouse? It's just a horrible time. So Chad Lutzke, Stirring the Sheets, number 6.
I need to check that one out too. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
My number 6 is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. This is no need to talk about it. Everyone knows it. If you haven't read it, if you guys think the movie is scary, so I'm a really seasoned fan of horror, and I read this this was the first novel that I read entering my 20s, so that's a fun little fact. But at this point, I was all into watching horror movies. The movie does not scare me. I love it for its effects, its story. I was shocked at several sections in this book legitimately gave me chills down my spine, and I could not get them out of my head. Blatty is just a phenomenal writer. I loved how much he goes into the darkness of satanic rituals that's not explored in the movie. It is some really, really sick stuff. Like, you want to talk about Black Mass and stuff like that. The ending was amazing, and it should be said, I'm not an atheist. I guess I have no problem. I'm an agnostic. Everyone in this book seemed like a real person and suffered from relatable human problems, except of course for the main characters. So it was a lot of fun overall, and yeah, Exorcist, nothing more to say.
Yeah, the Exorcist is a classic. It's so well known. I definitely have to read that one. I haven't tried it, but I think the audiobook I can get on Scribd, so maybe that'll be my next audiobook. Yeah. But yeah, number 5 for me is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. It is easily one of the most fun books. We've already kind of touched on it. It is one of the most fun books I have ever read, and I read it and was left wanting more. So Dark Matter, pick it up, read it. It's just amazing. So number 5.
Awesome, man. My number 5 is Whoever Fights Monsters by Robert K. Ressler. It's about this dude's 25 years tracking serial killers for the FBI. Don't want to spoil anything about it. The opening of the book is horrendously messed up, and it is easily the best true crime book I've ever read in my life. And I've read a bunch because, me and Josh are into this stuff. It's not for everyone, but it's worth reading one of these things, I think, in terms of just knowing what's out there, like we said, meaning the depravity of humanity. This book made me terrified to leave any doors or windows unlocked for even a brief moment, especially with some of the cases. It reminds you of how suddenly death can approach you, as well as how well hidden some of the most twisted people are out there. His pacing was great. He does spend some time patting himself on the back, but when your job puts you in front of, and that's the number one complaint on Goodreads, I have no problem with that. When your job puts you in front of the kinds of people he describes, I have zero problems with him reminding me of how much he puts on the line. So that's Whoever Fights Whoever Fights Monsters by Robert K. Ressler.
Now that one I gotta, yeah. I'm just gonna have to just look at the timestamp and just find all these books.
Absolutely,
there's so
man.
many.
Yeah, me too.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
So number 4 is The Return of the King. No real reason to spend any more time on it, but it is the wrap up for the Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings trilogy. And yeah, you can't go wrong. The movie brings a tear to my eye, and the Fellowship of the Ring is the beginning, and the Return of the King is the finale. So can't go wrong. Number
Awesome.
4.
Yeah. My number 4 is, and if you guys feel like we're spending less time on these, you're not going crazy. We are. Okay. number 4. Number 4 is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. This is a dark, grim, but very cathartic coming-of-age story that is very epic in its scope. I loved how it showed two people from the same place who start off in totally different social statuses, but connect in such a deep way. It's such a beautiful story about friendship.
That's awesome.
And another mention to Edward Lorne, because he referred to this on Goodreads as tragedy porn. But I think that's both hilarious and slightly accurate. But I think once you get over that fact, the way guilt, childhood burden, strained friendships are explored in this are masterful. Absolutely masterful. The effects that choosing to stay silent about injustice in your youth, the effect that can have on your adult psyche, is depicted in vivid detail, and it has one of the most powerful and well done third acts I've ever read. And many people say it's too emotionally manipulative. I'll always think that's a stupid complaint because this is writing. An author's job is to move your emotions, so this guy does it perfectly and tells one of the best stories I've ever read. So yeah, The Kite Runner.
Kite Runner. I've heard good things.
Yeah.
So my number 3 pick is Dune by Frank Herbert. And this one was honestly surprising for me. It was one of the first pieces of classical sci-fi fiction that I have ever read. And yeah, the politics, the world building, second to none in the genre. And yeah, I actually went out and bought like all 12 of the books after reading the first one, and I never dug back into the series, but I've heard just great things. It's well loved and respected. So, and yes, you can blame me for having to wrap things up. My pregnant wife has just arrived, and yes, I need to go spend some time with her. So,
Yeah, man. But awesome, dude. Yeah, I gotta check out Dune for sure. Okay, my number 3 is Choke by Chuck Palahniuk. This dude is nothing needs to be said about him, so I won't spend any time praising the author. We all know who this guy is. Choke is simply one of his most underread, underappreciated, and one of the best novels ever written I've ever read. Period. It's about Victor, who's a jaded sex addict who has a very strange method of garnering sympathy from others. It's equal parts disturbing, hilarious, intelligent, and heart-wrenching. His ramblings are deliciously cynical when they need to be, but very poignant at other times. There's some graphic sex in this, so be warned. It's actually based off his father, who was murdered, who was a sex addict, so it holds a very special place in his heart. And it's not for the easily offended. It contains messages about self-worth, viewing life as something more than just the sum of your past mistakes, and not letting random people dictate what happiness should mean for you. And he delivers
awesome.
these ideas just so well, dude. Chuck Palahniuk is a master. So that's Choke, number 3.
I love Chuck Palahniuk. Yeah, he just released a new book that I got to check out. I've seen it on Goodreads. It's bouncing around. So Chuck Palahniuk is the man. So number 2 for me is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. And this book actually has a scene in it that has like scarred me for life. So yeah, I don't want to say
Oh
what it
yeah,
is.
I know what it is, knowing that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a partial spoiler. So I won't say that directly, but yeah, it just sits with me forever, that particular scene. And yeah, it weighs on me. So, but it's also just an outstanding book. So
Awesome.
main character is killer because you kind of pull for the guy the entire time, even though he's kind of a jerk, which is great. So
Oh, and this is kind of like against the rules, but one thing I forgot to mention for a Choke, I just remembered it, is
yeah,
it has the most bone-chilling twist I've ever come across in all of fiction. It's not known for its
nice.
twist. It's the twist to Fight Club is nothing. The this the
Really?
Dude, the twist is insane. But yeah, okay, so that was Choke. My number two, and by the way, I need to check out Pet Sematary. I've watched the movie, I've never read the book, so I got to do that.
Oh, the book's way better.
My number two is Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. The dude is a genius. He wrote this when he was Bret Easton Ellis wrote this in class for for an assignment, half of it, and the teacher said you should think about getting this published, and he did, and he became famous, and there goes his career, dude. So just goes to show you, I think people underplay talent a little, but yeah, it's the most disturbing novel about nihilism, aimlessness, and losing yourself in a devolving society I've ever read. The monotonous trance-like narration from Clay's, who's the main character, Clay's perspective, adds to the overall hollow, increasingly just scary aura of the story. Despite having social commentary aimed towards a different time period, it is so eerie to me how well Ellis's thoughts describe a lot of Generation Z as well. And it's impossible not to relate to it at the end, whether it be with the demographic the author was putting the magnifying glass over, or with the main protagonist. So definitely check out Less Than Zero.
All right, so we've made it to number one, and it is going to be The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. It is actually, I bought my daughter a hardcover edition, and I wrote her a little, it's almost like a poem in the beginning because I gifted it to her before she was even born. It's a story that's just meant a lot to me throughout my entire life. If I read something or see something, or if the world's gone to crap, I pick up The Hobbit and I sing the songs in it, or I just read about Bilbo and his journey, and it's life-saving for me. It feels like home, you know? So that book means everything to me.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, man. I mean, that dude's a genius. So there's
Everyone knows that storyline, but yeah, he's a genius, and he built, I mean, multiple generations of people. I mean, everyone knows The Hobbit. So.
Yep. Awesome, dude. Okay, so my number one. Josh already knows what it is because I rave about it all the time. It's not only my favorite collection, it's hands down, easily takes the cake for my favorite book of all time that I personally read. That is North American Lake Monsters by Nathan Ballingrud. It won the Shirley Jackson Award. It's his debut, which just makes me both depressed and amazed. Few authors are going to be able to surpass what he's done here. I'll just say that, guys. The tact and beauty with which he tackles pitch black subject matter is just masterful. Ballingrud is from a different planet when it comes to his prose. His capacity for vivid, unique, and well-paced storytelling is absolutely mind-boggling to me. He has an endless arsenal of harrowing and gorgeous metaphors, and the plot lines are just so unique and they move so efficiently. His style of writing feels like a cross between Keelan Patrick Burke and Stephen King, and yes, it's as good as it sounds. The actual story arcs themselves are extremely well thought out. If you go into this expecting traditional horror tropes, you're going to be very disappointed. These stories focus on characters who evolve as a result of something very dark and an unexpected happening in their life. They are supernatural, most of them. He treats the horror in these plots as a darkness that simply exists in our world, as opposed to something that goes beyond human comprehension. These are all slice of life stories, which burrow themselves deep into your heart and mind. And my favorites were The Monsters of Heaven, Wild Acre, and The Good Husband. The Hulu adaptation is coming out, I think, October 2nd. It's called Monsterland. Read this book first, because I'm hoping they do justice, but it's going to be very hard to do justice to something this good. And any horror fan that wants something original has to read it. So that's North American Lake Monsters.
Yes, and Syon actually gifted it to me, so that I definitely need to read that.
And to show you how much I love it, I gave it to you, man. I bought you a fresh copy, and I bought John from Books of Blood a fresh copy because I'm like, this people need to read this book.
That's awesome, man. That is so cool. Yeah, no, I definitely need to before I watch the show. That's for damn sure. So
yeah, man. I guess we could. This has been awesome, man. Thanks for having me on. You're an awesome dude, awesome booktuber, and it's just so cool. Like you know what I mean? You praise me so much. You give me so many shout outs. So I wanted to do something super fun with you. And
this
we have
is awesome.
such great conversations. So this is going to be something really cool for us to go back and look at some of what we like to read that we don't really talk about, because usually we
Oh,
talk
I
about
know.
horror, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure you guys get a lot of books to read out of this too. And I guess the final question would be is like, what are you currently reading, and what are you planning on reading next?
So I just finished The Girl Next Door, and honestly, I'm in a horror swing of things because of, the upcoming holiday that we all love so much. And also I love helping indie authors, but man, do I think I might need a break from dark subject matter. So I might pick up something nice, like palate cleansing, I might do like a sci-fi book or something. And I might need a week, like just like a couple days of just reading something nonsense, a little bit of
Yeah.
fantasy, a little bit of that. But so I actually picked up some, like, it's like a space marine book. It's like The Ruins of Earth or something. By, yeah, I think two authors wrote it. So it's going to be like cheesy sci-fi, just thrillering, And then I do
Awesome.
need to read your number one book before October when that show comes out.
Oh, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, what
So I
about you?
guess awesome, man. So I'm currently reading I Dark Matter, which I like. I gotta finish that so we can talk about it. We can rave about it privately. And then the next book I'm reading The Good, the Bad, and Sadistic by this really underappreciated extreme horror author called John Athan, aka
Mhm.
Jonathan. And
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna be interviewing him next week, guys, on my channel. So I'm super stoked for that.
Oh,
So I
sick.
feel like I owe it to him to read another one of his books. And I'm the next book I'm going to check out after that is the one you're sending me, which I'm very grateful for, is Israel Finn's Dreaming at the Top of My Lungs. After that, I'm going to just list a few names. I'm going to be checking out Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright, Life Expectancy by Dean Koontz, Wounds by Nathan Ballingrud, Succulent Prey by Rat James White, Bay's End by Edward Lorne, 20th Century Ghost by Joe Hill, and The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. So a
Uh,
little break, I guess, from a lot of indie stuff and just going for the big names
Neil
for
Gaiman, that's interesting for you
yeah.
to select. I like that. That's
Oh
cool.
yeah, man. I definitely will give him. Hey, man. Like, yeah, his horror stuff and Sandman is epic. So I'm like, I definitely need to read some
Yeah,
Gaiman.
he's got some fantastical. He's well respected in fantasy, man. Like, actually, like he he branches out like multiple genres, and I think that that's super
And
cool.
I've not read any Dean Koontz, which is why I started with Life Expectancy, because I hear that's the most Dean Koontzy of his all his one of it, and it's a
Yeah.
very good story. I've heard.
He has a great series. Like, he did a lot of reviews on.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh
know
yeah.
he, sometimes he doesn't care for some of the tropes that he
Oh,
has,
he
but
said he despises Dean Koontz now, but he said he's
yeah,
one of his favorite authors. So he said Life Expectancy is the best book you'll read by him. Uh, if you never read anything by Dean Koontz before, but he gave it 1 star because he said it's way too much like everything else he's read by him.
oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I've read a couple Dean Koontz. I enjoy him. He's kind of, you know what I mean? It's Dean Koontz. Like, you just read him and you're like, oh, that's a Koontz novel. You know what I mean? So there's nothing, if you like it, you like it. That's kind of one of those people. So I also should mention that Robert Ottone sent me his collection of stories. He's got, it's like a novelette in the beginning. Her internal heart and other stories, I think, or other
Yeah.
nightmares. Awesome cover, and yeah, super cool guy. He reached out to me. He actually wants to do like a chat too, like maybe on a stream or something. So
Awesome, man.
yeah, he's super cool. He actually emailed and he was like, review slash hangout. It was actually kind of neat. So he seems like
Yeah.
a really chill guy. So I like when I meet new authors like that. So
And
Robert Hatone, thank you.
And speaking of things I currently read and authors I hung out with, I gotta give this guy a shout out, man, because he's not only one of the nicest human beings I've ever met, he truly is going to go places with his work ethic, and that's Nicholas Gray, aka Spooky Noodles on YouTube. Josh just reviewed it. He released a new novelette called The Thing in the Ward. It is by far, and I have no problem admitting this. I'm good friends with Nicholas Gray. I wasn't the biggest fan of his first short story collection. I thought he could have used a lot of work editing and just thoughts in terms of the stories. But he's going to re-release that one, and in the meantime, he has really truly left his first really good mark in his writing career with his novelette The Thing in the Ward. It is one of the best depictions of cancer I've ever read. I mean that with 100% sincerity. It's in my top 15 best novelettes and short stories of all time. Highly recommend you guys check that out and go give Nicholas Gray a follow. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And piggybacking off of that, when I first started my channel, I fell into the groove of if you were a friend of mine or a person that was extremely nice, I tended to inflate reviews a little bit, if I'm being honest. And now that I've kind of turned over a new leaf, in being honest with Nick, that first collection did need a little bit more work. But I really just respect him as a person. And I did let that cloud my judgment a little bit in the first one. But that being said, this most recent release, The Thing in the Ward, was honestly one of the best shorter fiction pieces that I've read in my lifetime. He knocked it out of the park, like I said in my review. And if you have not tried his work, please support him on that story.
And I guess we should mention, not only is the story one of the best portrayals of cancer, the author himself is a cancer survivor of stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it's just truly inspirational. And
he's hugely inspirational for
it's
everything.
Just and I want him to enjoy this, because he really put a lot of work into this one, and it shows, and really it deserves to be read by a lot more people. So yeah, The Thing in the Ward by Nicholas Gray. It's 99 cents, guys. Go pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen a lot of love in the video that I posted, and he deserves all the credit for the work that he really put into this and poured his heart into it. And respect to Nick for that. Yeah, he's just such a good guy, and he's a good author too. So that's super cool to I'm just so excited for him to see all these good reviews that are coming in for it, that are genuine and actual good looks at his work. So that's awesome.
Absolutely, man. All right, man. Well, thank you again for having me on, man. I appreciate I'm the first author. I don't like to think of myself like that, even though technically I have a collection, but I'm a reader first and foremost, and I just need to read as much as I can and always keep learning, always being better at writing. So thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate the exposure, and I hope everyone has fun listening to my voice, because a lot of people, I've gotten comments like, man, I wonder how you sound, or like, I wonder like what's it like talking to him. So hopefully I don't sound like hopefully I don't sound too like outrageous. Hopefully I'm a normal guy.
We're both not radio guys. I mean, Jay Maddox is the radio guy. I mean, we can't live up to that. So thank you for coming on, Syon. I wouldn't have done it any other way, man. You were the first author to send me your piece of fiction, and I like I said in my review, man, you'll always have a place on my channel. So thank you so much, Syon, and cheers, everybody.
Thanks so much. Have a good night, guys.